Recording.
All right. My name is David, and in the last few weeks I discovered that the rear shocks on my 2004 Buick Lesare have basically ruptured their little internal oil seal, which means they're toast. Went looking on YouTube for a video on it, found one, but the gentleman who did that video found out that he had the wrong shocks and never made another video to follow up on it, so I thought I'd give it a try. Behind the camera is my son Matthew, and he's going to be the secret brains behind the video operation as we get this going. Here is the Buick in question. It's got about 107,000 miles on it. It needs quite a bit of other front suspension work, and I may or may not do that on a separate video depending on how this one goes. One thing to keep in mind is I am not a mechanic. If you're watching this, you follow the steps that I take at your own risk. I'm an ambitious do-it-yourselfer, and I don't know half of what I'm doing, so with that taken, here's what we're going to do. We got jacks and jack stands. This car also has a pneumatic air leveling system on the back, and as a result needs a different kind of shocks. The original Delco shocks from GM, the OEM shocks, cost about $200 to $300 a pair. So I found, after doing quite a bit of research on the internet, that Monroe makes what they call their Max Ride MA822 replacement shocks for this exact car, and they're available for about $60 off of Amazon as of October of 2013 when I'm making this video. This is the little attachment for the pneumatic system, and from what I can tell, and from my handy-dandy Haynes teardown book, this is a matter of taking the bolts off of the top, which are in the trunk, taking the bolts off the bottom behind the wheel, pulling the old shock out, putting the new shock in, and reversing it. So we're going to see what kind of an adventure we can get into. First thing is we're going to jack up the car, get it on jack stands, and get the wheel off. Okay, we've got the car jacked up, and we've taken off the wheel, 3/4 inch ratchet to get the wheel nuts off, and a little bit of brute power, translated, bigger hammer. And now we've got this arm exposed here. Here is the connector for the pneumatic ride system right here that we're going to take off. We'll take this off. Now we also have, here is where we see all the oil, where the seal on this shock has ruptured and is basically doing nothing now. And we see the two bolts down here that we'll need to release, and the control arm down here that we're going to need to support, because when this thing lets go, the only thing that will be supporting it is this spring, and if it bounces down, there's a sensor somewhere in this mechanism that could be damaged, and we don't obviously want that to happen. So we're going to stick some boards up here to support this control arm, this mechanism right here, and then we're going to loosen the two top bolts in the trunk, these two bolts right here, and these two bolts down here at the bottom, and then it should be a matter of reversing the installation for the new shock. So let's just see how it goes. First thing we're going to do, we're going to take those M8 bolts out of the top of the shock, but that's inside the trunk on this car. Now, one of the shop manuals I read said that you have to take out the rear speaker assembly, and that's not been the case. I can access this directly. All I have to do is peel back the trunk liner. I think in this particular book that I had, which is a Haynes teardown manual, it says that it's applicable from 1999 through some of the late 2000s, and some of the older models were actually rear-wheel drive, and that may be a part of the manual they haven't updated. I'm not sure, but I just know that what they said in the manual didn't quite match what I've actually got here. So I may just slide this guy in here and support it that way. Perfect. Put that guy right there. Right after I tighten the release. This is still not going up. There. Just enough to hold it up, and that's all we're doing. Nothing fancy. We'll make sure that's good and tight. Okay, so now we should be good to let go of the bolts in the trunk here. And it's a little dark because we're right in the sun, so this may be a little hard to see, but here's the trunk area. And this is just the soundproofing liner that is basically held in by these nasty little plastic bolts that hold the netting in. And ever since I've had this car, these things are stripped out within like the first month, and they're a nuisance to replace because they strip right out again. But there are a couple of those that you just undo, and that reveals the top mount where that shock is. There's a protective boot on the top that we're going to uncover, and that shows these two bolts that secure the top part of it, and I believe this part itself is that's the long end. That's the long end of the shock itself. So we got to get rid of all three of these guys, and I'm going to have a long throw. See, that's something that you learn along the way. This socket is not deep enough for these screws because this guy's too much exposed. My socket doesn't fit. So time out while I go get a deeper socket. Okay, found a deeper socket. This is a 9/16, and I believe that's metric. That's an M8. So you can go somewhere between 9/16 and a ½ inch. I think either one of those will work. But we'll give this a try. Oh yeah, that's my started, but it doesn't want to finish because it's too big. It doesn't want to go. And that's just the wrong size altogether. This isn't going to work. It gets it started, but once it's loose, it wants to crawl around the socket. It's just 9/16. It's just too big. It needs to be a half. Okay, having found the proper size bolt or ratchet nut, okay, there's one nut released. Okay, found the proper head. This is a 10 millimeter nut, or bolt, excuse me. So we're going to break this loose and see what we can see. Now, one thing that would be important to point out here is that I have the control arm supported by the jack, and I've got this side of the car on a jack stand that is underneath the frame at a good attachment point because I really don't want to get squashed by a car. It would not be, in fact, I'm moving my head out from underneath just in case anything crazy happens. And I'm going to tell my cameraman to scoot out just a little bit, just for safety's sake. There's one bolt, not broken, and unfortunately, there's nothing fun about this except to just get through it because it's a long bolt. You know what? I don't think this bolt is it's turning, but it's not moving. Okay, we finally found out what the problem was on this nut right here, the bolt that kept spinning in place. I was beginning to think that a thread was chewed up either inside the control arm or on the screw, it was going to make it impossible to bolt, or make it impossible to pull out. Well, I finally realized just what we were talking about before, the breaking of the speed nuts on the very top here. It looks like this is broken loose from the base, and now this nut was just spinning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold this guy with my little pair of slip joint pliers here and hold it and see if I can coax this bolt off now. This mounting nut off the back of the shock is what broke off and was causing this bolt to spin in place, and it took me probably half an hour just to get this bolt loose. But we got it loose by holding this thing up with a pair of needle nose pliers and forcing it against that until I could get this thing enough turns where it finally came loose. That probably took longer than this whole project really has to take, in all honesty. But that being as it may, we now have all 4 of the bolts off. The shock should be free on the bottom and the top. So all that's left here is to remove this clamp and take off this boot. There. Oh, that was easy enough. Okay. Now, this is the ugly, nasty, messy part. It's actually getting the old shock. We have success. What we had to do, we grabbed a hold of the top of the shock where it was released from the top, pulled down, compressed it. That pulled this mechanism out of the top of the trunk, pulled it forward, and the rest of the shock came out. And you can see here where all this oil has splattered all over this, where it has torn, and actually we have this inner seal, looks like it's ruptured and there's oil. So this thing has been out of commission for a long time. So now we just need to inspect the other shock to see what parts we need to replace and how we go about putting this back in place. Now the replacement part, the replacement shock comes with the corresponding bolts, this top part here, but I'm wondering if we need to replace, it looks like we need to reuse this guy right here, and that may be what holds this whole assembly on. Aha, that makes sense now. So now this looks like it's about, I'm going to guess, 5/8 of an inch. Let's see. 7/16 maybe? No, that's too big. That's not big enough. Half inch? No. 9/16. Nope. That's going to be 7/8 or bigger. That's not big enough. That's too big. So now, we'll take this guy. This was a 5/8 inch securing nut that goes on the end of this little cup that then holds this guy and this guy on the top. We'll now go put this guy on the new shock.